Have you ever wondered if the claims of Jesus could actually be proven in a court of law? J. Warner Wallace, a Dateline-featured cold case homicide detective, was saved and radically transformed investigating the claims of Jesus as a forensic investigator. In this episode of the Church Help Desk, he explains how to use apologetics in your local congregation or church groups.
Okay. Thanks so much for coming to this lunch. I will tell you up front, before we start, that I'm kind of in a position of mourning, if I'm honest with you, because this is the last bite of my chocolate chip cookie. So a lot of you guys are like thinking, you know what, I'm on a diet. I don't want to get fat eating chocolate chip cookies. I get that. So would you please pass your chocolate chip cookie to me right now? I'm dead serious, okay? I went home one time with 15 chocolate chip cookies in my bag. I could not even, thank you, sir. You know what? You are dubbing. I'm dead serious. I don't mind getting fat on those, okay? All right. Good man. I couldn't even eat them before they went bad. Like 3 of them went bad before I could finish them all. By the way, if you eat 6 in a row, that is weird. I'm just telling you. It's like a sugar rush thing that happens. I thought I was going to have like a stroke in the airplane. All right. What we're going to do in this session is try to be incredibly practical and take some of these ideas that we've been talking about and then how do we apply these. Now, I've had a couple of dinners and lunches with some of you where we've talked about this issue and how do we apply this then? How do we as pastors try to change our culture? Now, I probably just kicked that thing. So just forgive me while I'm very, very careful here. Okay, it'll come back up here in a second. So I want to be very, very practical and kind of give you a way to actually, how do I make this real in my own church setting? How do I make this not stop doing this? One thing I learned when you work with media is you have to have a bag of tricks. And although that converter is giving me fits right now, I know I've got an alternative in here. This might be it right here. I think I'm going to try this one. This one always works. So hang on. So forgive me while this was working perfectly, of course, before you guys got here. I know I'm going to stay off this side of the stage. Once I get it working, I'm just going to stay over there. So come on, pick it up. I know you can do it. All right. How many of you have a program in your church right now where you are teaching young people in some fashion, either Sunday school or it's in a small group setting or it's in okay, great. How's that been going for you? We're going to do a Q&A today also, by the way. We're going to stop short and do a Q&A so we can talk about this. But how is that working for you guys? Do you think that your students are adequately prepared to meet the challenges? Do you feel like in the state of Arkansas we're adequately prepared? Our young people are adequately prepared to meet these challenges? Do you see what I'm seeing anecdotally, where young people seem to be leaving the church? Are you guys seeing that too? Have your parents started complaining about it yet? I see it once in a while. I get a story. Someone will write me an email and say, hey, my kid's no longer a Christian. We'll get it. Come on, big guy. Do you think it's in the connection there? Oh, yes, you're the man. Make it work. That's going to cost you a cookie if you can't make it work. I got this one here. Don't worry about it. That's what I've learned to be flexible. All right, I'm going to say a couple things to you about what I see nationally, and then I'm going to give you a strategy by which I think you can help yourself and actually maybe do some good for your students. And for your adults as well. First of all, if we don't grab this as adults, if we don't see that it's our responsibility as the people my age to be serving the people who are younger, then nothing changes. Yes, sir. Because we cannot continue to assign this to people who are not who aren't leading from the front. Right? I mean, do you think that who's better prepared, I think, to equip our people? Is it going to be us or are you? I mean, you've got youth pastors in here, right? And the question is, we have to help our parents see the role that they play in this. And we have to take it as a burden as an entire congregation. When we do some of the things we're going to talk about today, it requires me to have enough adequate leadership at an adult level to make this work. That means I need volunteers. So as a youth pastor, I need a bunch of adult volunteers, people who are parents and grandparents. If they don't see the burden and connect the dots on this, I won't even have enough staff to make this work. So what I'll tell you I'm seeing at colleges, I used to think, before I was reading the statistics on how many young people are leaving and when they are leaving, that there was a sad mathematics that was occurring in universities. That we had, number one, we had basically under-equipped young people who then add to that aggressive university professors in campuses that they're more secular than Christian. And that alone would be bad enough. Adding the under-equipped students to the overly aggressive secular university setting. If that's all the math was, that's got a bad equation. But it's worse than that because there's a third thing. The third thing is that our young people they're like us. They have a fallen human nature. Dude, trust me, if I can sleep with my girlfriend and feel okay, give me a worldview that accounts for origins, gives me some purpose in my life, and lets me sleep with my girlfriend without feeling bad about it, goodbye Christianity. We all want Christianity not to be true at this age, so that we can do what we want to do. So if we're already thinking, I wish it wasn't true, and somebody can affirm that online for me and give me some reason not to believe this, and then I get to university and I've got a setting that, we don't believe that either, the mathematics are even worse. And that's what I think we're seeing. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to give you a strategy. It won't be a visual strategy, apparently, but it'll be a strategy that will help you to turn a corner on this. Here's my first and best advice to all of you who are leading in the church. Stop teaching. It is a waste of time. You've got good teachers right now. And we've had good teachers in the church, haven't we? And we have this problem anyway. So apparently good teachers don't get this done. They don't. What you need is to turn your course from teaching to training. I stopped teaching the minute I graduated my seniors in high school as a youth pastor, and they all but one walked away from the church. I said, no more teaching. That's a waste. I know better, okay? First responders train. Can you imagine if I could handle every call for service? If I could handle every call for service just by staying in the dispatch room on a phone? Would I ever learn how to shoot my gun or drive my car fast or defensive tactics? No, I wouldn't learn any of that stuff because there's no need to. I have no intention of leaving the building. If I have no intention of leading the building, then there's no point in training. But it turns out we've become this way as a church. We just teach kids. We don't train them, though, because what is the difference between teaching and training? Training is teaching with a challenge at the end. Boxers train. Why? Because they've got a fight on the calendar. I didn't even realize that Colin McGregor was actually in any kind of shape to fight. But apparently he was. He had been training this whole time because he knew he had a calendared fight on the schedule. Remember when Muhammad Ali was fighting? My favorite fighter of all times. But I remember he fought, Frazier, twice, 3 times. And there were times in between fights when one or the other guy would get fat. And I was just worried. I was like, man, this guy's looking terrible. Oh, it's still 6 months off. Now, once it's 6 weeks off, these guys would be in the best shape of their life on the eve of the fight, right? Well, why? Because there's going to be a fight tomorrow. They are training toward the challenge that's on the calendar. So when I started to switch this paradigm, I knew that I had to move from a teaching model to a training model. And I simply knew that was going to happen by changing the way I thought about my students. So I'm going to give you a paradigm, train, T-R-A-I-N, that will help you to turn your teaching into training. So the T, the first, oh, look at you. You had to come all the way up here? Dang, you're good. The first step in this is the T. And the T is for test. Test. Now, we have a bar in our town called the Crest. It's a biker bar. And if you're a brand new guy, you're out in training, you just came out of the academy and you're on your 7-month training program, well, you're going to have assigned to you a field training officer, an FTO. And that FTO is going to take you around the place and he's going to watch you and see if you can do your job. And as a matter of fact, every time there's a call for service at the Crest Bar, every time there's a call for service, you're going to have to go. And it's not even in your beat. You could be handling the beat across town. Doesn't matter. They're going to send your car because you're the trainee. And the FTO is going to get to that bar with you, and he's going to step out of that car with you. And as you're getting ready to handle that bar fight, this is what the FTO is going to do. Because he wants to see, can you handle this fight? And if you get in trouble, he'll jump in. But hopefully he's not going to have to jump in because he'll have a story. You don't want your FTO jumping in with you. Oh, hey, don't get too cocky, okay? Because the minute I change this or touch this, it could go bad. Well, I have to switch now to where we are. Hang on. Oh, God. Hang on, I'm going to do it. Hey, there's the Crest Bar. All right. So every night this gets ugly, and field training officers, FTOs, are simply here to see if you can pass this test. Because it turns out that every officer at some point has to be tested to find out what he doesn't know or what he or she doesn't do well. And then after you're tested, it changed. I remember my son, we have a guy in our, Royce Gracie. Gracie is a jiu-jitsu fighter. He won the first 5 UFC championship fights back in the day. He's a ground fighter. And he's got a dojo. Gracie University is in our town. And so a lot of our guys go there to train. And so my son goes there to train with him. And he's a brand new officer. And he comes over to my house for dinner. And he's got this big mark on the side of his head. And I said, dude, what happened to you? He said, I was training at Gracie's. And he choked me out in 30 seconds. So that's not good. He said, yeah. So I see him about 4 or 5 weeks later. And he's got a big mark on his neck. So I said to him, Gracie? He said, yeah. I said, dude, you're not getting any better. He says, no, actually, it took him about 2.5 minutes to choke me out this time. And I said, oh, that's exactly what you're trying to do. Dude, if you can just hold on for 2.5 minutes until your partner gets there, this guy will not choke you out and take your gun and shoot you in the head with it. Sometimes 2.5 minutes is all you need. But you got to have that test. He discovered quickly with Gracie what he couldn't do. And then he was dedicated to the task to get better. If you were to ask me to come to your youth group and work with your youth group, the first thing I want you to do is to introduce me as the local philosophy professor. Because I want to go in with these young people with their little smiley faces and they're all happy to see a guest speaker. And I want to basically beat them with a stick. Until all these little smiley faces aren't so smiley no more, okay? That's what I'm looking for. At the end of it, I will reveal to them that I am not an atheist professor. I'm actually a Christian who is here to show you how you did. I did this one time for Chuck Smith's church back when Chuck was still alive, Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. They're getting ready to go to England to do a missions trip on evangelism at a big festival in England. So, okay, great. So we came in for several weeks, and I brought my son Jimmy to role play. And I introduced Jimmy as an atheist student who was no longer a Christian. Now, the guy who asked me in, there were 600 students. The guy who asked me to come, the campus pastor, did not tell the teachers and the principal that I was role playing with this kid. I wish he had. So we get in there, and Jimmy stands up and says, here's why I'm no longer a Christian. And he's young looking at the time. He was probably 23, 24. He had long hair before he was a cop, and he just worked this group to death. And every time he made a claim about evolution or whatever it was, somebody would stand up, try to make the Christian rebuttal, and he would just knock it down. To the point where the principal was getting really hot and decided to get up and put an end to this. So he got up and made a statement about evolution, and Jimmy said, oh, the problem is you don't have any education in evolution. Let me help you. Says this to, very calm, says this to the principal. Oh my gosh, now all hell broke loose, right? And I am worried because I'm looking at the campus pastor who realizes this is not, I should have told my principal, this is getting ugly. Because I'm going to ask 2 questions at the end of this. The first question is going to be, How did you guys do in defending your faith? Give me a scale 1 to 5. How do you think you guys did? People will say, can I say -1? No, it has to be a number. Okay, 1. I want them to see that they can't pass the test right now. They're terrible. But the second question is harder. It's, how did you treat the atheist? And Jimmy is now, he's revealed himself to be the Christian son of the guy who's speaking. What happens is we have a fight or flight syndrome because we cannot defend what we believe. We become snarky pretty quick. Defensive. And I want to get rid of that in my students quickly. I want to show them that that's not good. This testing is at the key because at some point, just like officers, every student has to be tested so they can know what they don't know. Because it turns out, if I can start by showing you what you don't know, well, then you're far more likely to lean in to prepare and make up for what you don't know so you can accomplish the task. Now, you might say, well, how do I, okay, so what I tried to do, I have a book, you're going to get a copy of Forensic Faith today when you leave. We got copies for all of you. And we talk, this is all from Forensic Faith. And I will tell you that for those of you, we have a lot of copies of Forensic Faith. We may not have one for all of you, but we have a list we'll make then if you don't get one today. And that's just a list we keep and we hang it in the wall because that means you're all a bunch of losers who are getting no book, okay? No, we'll actually send you a book. But I put on our website, the Forensic Faith book website, a 21-minute test that I would ask each of you, it's in the book also, I would ask you to take the test. It gives you 21 minutes to answer 7 questions. 7 questions that are the most common questions that we get on college campuses related to the Christian worldview. But you've only got 3 minutes to answer each question. And I will tell you that if you can get 3 minutes with somebody, that's amazing. You should get like 60 seconds. I should have you try to do this in 280 characters. Because that's really the world that our kids are living in right now. It's a 280 character world. But at least it'll help you to see what you don't know. So you begin with the test. The next thing you do, the R is for, you got to require something. You got to raise the bar. You got to require more. I will tell you something. I'm always amazed. Look, I was asked, I was saved in a huge mega church. That at the time probably had 18, 20,000 members. And that was 22 years ago. And it was a huge, and a part of it was a struggle, right, to even find your identity in such a huge place. When I went to the next church, it was 250 people. And my lead pastor says, Jim, I just need you for now just to build a youth group. Get people to come. So if you've ever been tasked with that, what do you end up doing? To be honest, you don't raise the bar. Most of us lower it. So if you had this task in front of you, okay, how am I going to get a bunch of folks to come? I got some kids here now. I want them to invite their friends. Probably going to involve some kind of food and games. Am I right? So most of what we see in youth ministry is not dominated by, in Southern California it often is, but it's going to involve some high degree of food and games. Meanwhile, my students had parents who raised the bar on every other aspect of their education. I had kids who would come here for food and games, but they would at home they were in international baccalaureate classes, advanced placement classes. They had coaches for soccer, coaches for softball, coaches for volleyball and basketball, high bars in every other aspect. And I knew they could achieve those high bars because as parents, we often ask our guys, our gals to raise the bar as they're preparing for college. This is very true in Southern California, right? So I know what they can really handle. But not with us. In youth ministry, what are we doing? We lower the bar. It turns out you don't need to lower the bar. I want to encourage all of you to teach the stuff you would teach to adults to your junior hires. But you got to figure out how to teach it. How to make it visual. So when I first started as a youth pastor, my kids were not quite the age of my ministry. Here they are in my photograph. I have 2 boys and 2 girls. This is the first year we were youth pastoring. So they're too young to be in the high school and junior high youth pastorate. But they didn't want to go to their affinity groups. They wanted to stay with mom and dad on church day. So I said, okay, no problem. You can come with us. And my boys would just hop in with the junior hires. They just fit in pretty easily. And then the girls would sit in the laps of the high school girls who would treat them like their younger sister. It was awesome, okay? Now, I was not teaching at a high school level. I was teaching at a college level. The stuff I'm doing is stuff I did. I did the same talk I did with you last session on biblical reliability. It's typical of what I did. As a matter of fact, I was giving those talks, that exact talk I was teaching to high schoolers when a buddy of mine, Sean McDowell, who's Josh McDowell's son, I was doing it for his high schoolers. He's a high school teacher at the time. And Sean said to me, you know what, you should write a book about that. And I said, okay. And I wrote Cold Case Christianity from that presentation. But it's the same presentation I was giving junior hires. It turns out if you aim high, don't be surprised if your kids catch it. So as these kids grew up, they grew up around this stuff all the time. Now I have a spectrum of belief here between my kids. There's a spectrum of belief here, like probably for all your kids. Do not beat yourself up over the fact that you've got some spiritual studs and some spiritual losers, okay? In every family, right? That just happens, okay? I don't think it was that bad for my family, but I'll tell you, this is Mia. They have another picture here. Yeah, here's Jimmy's wedding. So this is Mia. She's in the Marine Corps. She's huge. My daughters are adopted out of foster care, so they look nothing like their mom, okay? But she's actually got a pointer in her nose. Did you notice that? Oh. But anyway, I would take her with me to work the book table at my talks. And Mia would say to me, you know, I could do your talk better than you. Because I think I'm a lot funnier than you. And I could probably do your talk better. And you know, she could. Word for word, because she's been listening to that talk since she was 4 or 5. So if you aim higher than you ever have before, because you're trying to reach, I was just trying to reach high schoolers. Well, it turns out I reached the high schoolers with college level stuff. I reached the junior hires, and then I ricocheted that stuff off into my own kids. Ricochet apologetics. Lee Strobel is a friend of mine. He always calls about ricochet evangelism. This is ricochet apologetics. My question for all of you who are leading youth ministries is, how high is your target? Raise it. Raise it. Test, require. Now you got to arm your kids with something good. Arm your kids with something good. You know, when we do law enforcement, we would never send our police officers out into the field without tools, so we send them with a bunch of tools. You don't send them empty-handed. But you also send them with training for how to use the tools properly. So we have training that goes along with it. Now we send our students to college. And my question is, are we preparing our students for college? And what I want to do when I'm preparing young people for college is I want to inoculate them. It's inoculation theory. In other words, I don't want to isolate them from the harsh realities. I want to, when you get inoculation for flu, what are they giving you? They're giving you a dose of the virus. Your body learns to defeat that small dose, and now when it encounters the big dose, it's immune. We're inoculating young people. And that means I've got to start with the bad ideas that are out there. So these are the books that I used several years ago. There are many more now I would probably pick. But these are still good books to use. I want my young people to encounter bad ideas while they're still with me. I'm not going to let them hear for the first time as a freshman or a junior while they're going to the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and they're sitting in Bart Ehrman's class, and for the first time they're going to hear that stuff we talked about today? No. I'm going to make sure they know all that stuff first, so when they hear it, they're like, this is so stupid. That's what I want them to be able to do. So I got to present bad ideas. So in our youth ministry, we presented the bad ideas. This is what the other people are saying. It's inoculating them. Of course, you have to at some point turn and teach them truth. So we have this problem about biblical literacy in the country. We know that. We also have a problem that we can't defend what we think we know. So I started to do is simply teach the Bible and answer the objections along the way. So it was all apologetics, start to finish. And of course, I used a lot of texts that I would require them to read. Those are good books. If you don't have them, you should get them. Of course, the best 3 books are these 3 books right here. Now, what am I trying to do here? I'm trying to help them from encountering bad ideas from somebody else first. Now, Andrew Dean is a guy who wrote to me about 2 years ago, and here's what he said, and I think he's one of the last generation that is probably going to feel this way, because I actually think people feel this way earlier now, but this is what Andrew said. He said, my dad was a Southern Baptist preacher, and while I was growing up, I basically lived at the church. I knew all the Bible stories, was even baptized when I was 8. After graduating high school, I went to college to get a degree in mechanical engineering. Now, one might think a degree of this kind would involve little or no discussion of whether or not God exists, or if Jesus was a real person, but I encountered these and many more objections. I had a literature class where the professor gave a presentation on how Jesus was copied from other gods and how this explained away the mythology of Jesus. I had an electromagnetics course in which the professor viciously attacked the concept of intelligent design while simultaneously teaching other things. He had a space technology class in which the professors vehemently argued for the existence of aliens, but refused to acknowledge the existence of God. These are just a few examples from many interactions I had with professors. Unfortunately, most of our fellow brothers and sisters in Christ are severely lacking in training. And when they encounter even the weakest arguments, they're not prepared. As a Christian in the college setting, you're being constantly challenged, constantly poked and prodded. It's easy to throw away your hands in the air and become convinced that your faith is like a lie. And you're being trampled every day by both professors and peers. All Christians, especially ones in college, must know what they believe and why they believe it, if they have any hope of surviving with their faith. I think college is almost like an atheist ambush. The Christians are walking in totally unaware of the danger until it's too late and the damage has already been done. I think that could actually be said now just about this is your atheist ambush, guys. This is the new atheist ambush right here. If your students are getting these in their hands before they've been inoculated, so that's why we got to start so much earlier. It used to be we would say, hey, I'll teach apologetics to high school seniors because they're going to go to college next year. Too late. It's too late. You got to start teaching this stuff robustly in junior high. Our junior high is 7th and 8th grade. I don't know what it is for you guys here. Start teaching it in junior high. I rapidly think that junior high ministry might become the most important teaching ministry in the church. Anyway, that's why I wanted to take time to thank you, he says. When I entered college, I was struggling with many of the objections I encountered. I discovered your podcast, your research, the evidentiary approach was incredibly helpful. And as a result, I actually exited college with my faith even stronger than when I began. What we're trying to do is to say, look, if all we're going to do as parents and as leaders and as educators and as pastors is simply shield and isolate our students from bad ideas, well, at some point they're not going to be with us. There'll be no shield and they'll be exposed to these ideas directly. On the other hand, if we will simply inoculate them from bad ideas, then they can go out into the world and stand tall because they've been inoculated. In order to do this, though, you have to be inoculated. Part of the problem is that most of us can't answer the objections, and we find ourselves flat-footed. So my question to you in this room is, what are you reading? I get it. There's so many good things we could read. But you know, if you're in a situation where you have an urgent need, if you, for example, I found myself the other day reading about how to change valves in a shower. The faucet valves. Who wants to read that? I had a leaky valve in a shower. So I needed to read that day so I could figure out how to fix this valve without stripping the valve. I wasn't sure if I was turning it the right way. It just wasn't working. It was frozen. I was like, oh, I'm doing this wrong. So I read about it and I figured it out. You read sometimes when you have a crisis and you'll start reading stuff you never read before. I published with Cook, David C. Cook. The next book is with Zondervan. But Cook also publishes Francis Chan. Trust me, Francis sells 1,000 times more books than I do. Christian apologetics, if you think you're going to make money selling Christian apologetics books, good luck. About 1% of the Christian community is even interested in apologetics. Yet 60% of their kids are walking away from their faith because they're too stupid to be able to stop it. I'm going to be honest with you. Now is the time to read about shower valves because we have a leaky faucet. Make sense? Train, require, arm, and then finally, this is the big one that changes everything, involve. Involve by deploying students into the field. Remember, this is my station. If I was to be able to handle all these calls by staying in the station, I would never train. If there's no point in deploying, there's no need for training. The question is the church doing this? Do we have an active idea about how we are going to, as a group, deploy? We sometimes say, I'm going to give you these things to do because I trust that when you're on your own at work this week or at school this week, you'll do. No, do not trust people to do stuff when you're not there to do it with them. They're not going to do it. I'm honest. Be honest. We keep on thinking, I'm going to teach this stuff, then you can apply it in your daily life. You won't. I at least have to get you in the battlefield together. And then afterwards, you have a far better chance of doing it because you've seen how we did it. You've been there already. You've already done it. So I used to think, hey, how am I going to become a better pastor? I could teach you on the chalkboard how to do some things. This will not get it done. At some point, we start off every training day on a chalkboard or a whiteboard. Here are the basic principles of takedowns or wrestling or however kind of defensive tactics. We will draw them out. We'll do pursuit training. The first hour of pursuit training is going to be on a whiteboard talking about apex of turns, how to accelerate out of the turn, how to 7, 8, 9 break into the turn, all the things we do in pursuit training, right? But then we get you off the classroom, we take you outside, and at some point you have to get on the mat. And then once you get on the mat, we're going to see if you actually learned it. You're going to learn all the stuff you learned today, mostly on the mat. Instruction is not the same as learning how to really do it. So I used to think, hey, well, I could become a better youth pastor by simply, I have a master's degree in theology. I got that master's degree, so I want to be a better youth pastor. But it turns out this will not make me a better youth pastor. You don't change your proficiency in this area with study like this. You change your impact with a calendar. That's all you need to change everything. All you need is this calendar. Because teaching becomes training when you put a challenge on the calendar. And now everyone knows we're getting ready for that thing. I've already shown you how much you suck. So now let's start training and get ready for this. Can you say suck in a Southern Baptist? I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Your students are saying it though, trust me. So I said, okay, I want to teach. Now, I break things up into 3 things. My parents did not care how much theology their kids knew. I'll be honest with you. What they don't want them to do is, no skipping rope and smoking dope and sleeping with their girlfriend. They want you to stop doing that stuff. Just make sure my kids aren't doing that stupid stuff, and we're good to go. But I knew that I could ask for behavior, and I'm not going to get it. Behavior is grounded in theology. So I knew I had to teach in 3 legs to this stool: theology, apologetics, behavior. TAB training, TAB. So you want your students, are your students good theologians right now? Do you think your students can connect the dots in terms of theology? Understand how to defend what they believe theologically? We have a very unique worldview. We believe in the triune nature of God. Can your kids defend that? Do they even know why that's important or if that's important? I knew I wanted my kids to know how to do this. So I had to put a calendar challenge. So I said, okay, no problem. We're in Southern California. We are 12 hours by car from Salt Lake City. So we developed a 7-day trip to Salt Lake City, which we called the Utah Missions Trip. And what we were going to do in that 7 days was put our kids through evangelism hell. So we take a group, 20 or so we started, I think, but this might be our 2nd or 3rd year. My kids are in there. My daughters are even in here, and here. They're just little kids. One daughter's hiding behind her, but she's in there too. And we'll spend some time training with local giants in the field, like Sandra Tanner, and others who are just really good, smart apologists for Christianity to Mormons. But then we're going to go on the campus. We're going to go on the temple grounds. And we're going to put our kids out there and let them ask questions of the sisters who are running as tour guides until they throw us off the campus, which they will. And then we're going to be in front of the campus. This is in front of the temple grounds, doing street evangelism for 2 days with anyone who comes. This young man is coming with that backpack because he's getting ready to do his temple ceremonies. He's got his temple garments in that backpack. He's there to go into this temple and baptize the dead. So our students are talking to him before he goes in. This is on the campus of BYU. We tell our students, grab lunch, go in the food court, and sit with 4 or 5 Mormon students and strike up a conversation. Trust me, those will go forever. You got to break them up. Now, this was a bad year because, as you can see here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Mormon missionaries having lunch with the 6 black-shirted Satan-worshiping Christians right there. So I told them afterwards, no, we can't, you got to look like who you're trying to reach. You can't go looking like this when students aren't dressing that way. So we had to change. Now, as soon as this is over, we'll go on to the area around the campus at BYU is Provo, Utah, is the highest percentage of return Mormon missionaries who are now going to school at BYU. And they live in the apartments in the city of Provo. So you can go door to door in Provo as Christian missionaries, and you'll encounter the returned Mormon missionaries who are dying to talk to you. And they see you as the lost people group. So our students would go on these things, and they would go door to door next. And after it's over, they would come home, and they would say, oh my gosh, that was terrible. I got worked today. Just got worked. I didn't make any progress at all. And I've been training for 8 weeks before we left. We trained for 8 weeks every Sunday morning, every Sunday night. I had them read books. They had to read 2 books. They had to take 2 tests before I would let them go on this trip. They thought they were ready. But then when you get there, so what do they do? All night long, they would sit up and study. I didn't have the heart to tell half these kids that, tomorrow you're just going to get worked a different way. But hey, I want you to study. At 2 o'clock, I make them go to bed because we're up again at 6 to start all over again. These kids wanted to do this. They called it transformational. If you want to teach theology, just take your kids someplace where there's a prevalent heresy. And you will learn your theology in order to talk to the people who hold the other view. We did this also with Islam. And we started off at mosques. So my point is, I want this result. I want to train instead of teach. So I put the battle on the calendar. They know it's coming, and then we train up to it. This was not going to teach the A, though, apologetics. That is our Berkeley mission trip. So UC Berkeley is a pretty hostile campus, and I knew that my kids were getting their faith pulled out from under them at the campus of Berkeley, so I took my kids there. Now, this is a different kind of trip because what you're going to encounter there are not a bunch of proselytizing atheists. You're going to encounter apathy at its finest and highest on university campuses. But there are atheist groups who will engage you. So we had one year, for example, we took these 3 seniors. We didn't tell our high schoolers which 3 we were going to pick until the day of the event. But we're told we're going to put you on the stage in front of 600 students, half Christians, half atheists. We arranged this with the local church. These are 3 atheist grad students in ancient languages, ancient history, and in, I think, psychology. And we had an open dialogue between these 3 17-year-olds and these 3 25 to 30-year-olds. Do you think my kids were paying attention during the training for this? Because they weren't sure who was going to get picked to do this. We knew who we were going to pick, but we just didn't tell them. Also, this is a local group called Fiat Lux in Berkeley, so we have just table talk, and we would put a question on the board. Is there truth? Does truth exist? And we let these tables, 3 Christians, 3 atheists in each table, discuss it back and forth. Very cordial, but it really is eye-opening, I think, for a lot of our students to see what this looks like. And then we take them out from there. We also introduce them to the local atheists who are evangelistic, who do want to strip your kids. And there's a local local East Bay atheist group in San Francisco that will do that for your kids. So we invite them in to have presentations. You can give the whole hour presentation to our kids. All we ask is you give us an hour at the end for Q&A. Our students have already heard all these arguments, and they're able to ask really good tactical questions at the end to expose bad thinking. That's the whole goal anyway. Back before Philip Johnson just passed away last year, we would take our kids to see Philip Johnson. Philip was the kind of the grandfather of the intelligent design movement. So he also teaches law at Berkeley, and so we would have our kids spend time with Philip. Then we'd take them on the campus of UC Berkeley, and they would do conversational surveys, talking to students about their religious beliefs. And every night they would come home and say, man, I got worked. So they're studying again. This is what it's all about. It's the studying afterwards, trying to get ready for the next day. That's worth the price of admission. Now, you might think, well, how do I do that here? There's lots of small things you could do. We wrote another book, Sean and I, called So the Next Generation Will Know. We didn't bring that for you guys today, but a lot of this is going to be in forensic faith. But you could take single-day excursions to local universities. We provide you with the surveys we use. You can see those in the book. And you can just take the survey with you and do single-day excursions with your groups. What you want to do is elevate the perceived sense of danger that your students are going to encounter. Because if you elevate the sense of danger, they will prepare harder getting ready for this, and they're more excited to go. That's why we try to go away from home so you can't come home at night. I want an otherworldly experience for students that's dangerous. And they will go in large numbers. But this is a one-day trip. We've done a bunch of these one-day trips locally with Impact 360, which is in Atlanta, Georgia, near Atlanta, Georgia. It's the same people who are Chick-fil-A have actually started that program. That's right, Chick-fil-A, which is why I eat their cookies. I don't really like the cookies, but I like to support their cause. But also, you can start, by the way, if you simply said to your students, I want you to start a class in which you're teaching your peers this material. Well, they're going to have to learn the material. The best way to activate someone to learn material is to ask them to teach it. Ask your students to teach. We used to have several weekends a year where we would assign our seniors to teach the Sunday service. And it was stressful, but that caused them to have to get ready for that, and that was part of the training. You could also do something as simple as just do this thing called a family evidence night on Sunday nights, where I would just do a whiteboard. I'd take an issue with my family, and I would draw out what the case is for on the whiteboard. Anything you can do to put something on the calendar, that's going to turn your efforts into training. Doesn't have to be that much. If you just said, I'm going to start a web page on Facebook for young people to examine, trust me, you will get a lot of people who will join you to beat you up. And it's going to cause you to have to learn something in order to defend your case. Just do something that you put on the calendar that will actually activate what you're going to do. For us, one year, it was simply that we thought we're going to share the gospel with my stepmother, who's been been a Mormon my entire life. So I said, I'll tell you what, we're just going to share the gospel with Lorraine. So my boys and I, we prepared before our summer vacation to get ready to share the gospel with, it was a train wreck, okay? But the preparation was awesome. And my boys learned so much about how do you deal with family members who hold a different worldview? Do something. That's all I'm suggesting. If you'll put something on the calendar, rather than just teach without, imagine this, folks. Imagine you said, I'm going to teach you guys, okay, you're in high school, I'm going to teach you guys trigonometry, but relax, okay? Because I don't do any tests. You're all going to get an A. Just relax. But just pay attention. I'm going to teach you trigonometry. There'll be no test. You all are guaranteed an A. Do you think your students are going to pay attention to that? No. They're going to spend their time studying for the classes where they do have a test. We don't have any tests. Just show up, you get an A. Everyone gets a trophy. Let's put something on the calendar and show kids that they need to actually do something to get from here to the calendar. Because that little time between you setting the thing and talking about it and actually going, it will be your most intense point of training. Last thing, and then I'll take a few questions. The N is for nurturing. Look, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but there are times when nurturing is really important because people are going to get hurt. You got to tend to people's wounds. Sometimes success is really obvious and failure is really obvious. But sometimes if you think about it, success involves a bunch of incremental failures along the way. And you can get beat up on the road to success. And this is going to happen with some of your students on these crazy trips we take. This guy's called Stitch Duran. He still works in the UFC. He's a cut man. His job is to, when the guy comes back in the corner, is to close the cut long enough. It's harder in the UFC than it used to be in boxing, but to close the cut long enough to get through the next 3-minute round. You got to be the same kind of Stitch person. We invited a guy in to our young people. The first year, I took a group to Berkeley, and his name is Larry Johnson. He is a member of the local East Bay atheist groups. He's very willing to come in and spend an hour telling your kids why Christianity is not true. I brought my group in. They were all well trained except for one student who I never should have allowed to come on the trip. And she came because a friend asked her to come. She missed the first half of training. Back in those days, I just let her come. Because I wanted to have some inertia in terms of size for her students. I figured her friends would help her through this, having no idea what Larry was going to talk about this day. He was our first guest speaker. And he came in to the local church where we were staying in the city of Oakland, and he presented the case against Christianity. Here's how he presented it. He said, Students, I'm going to describe a deity for you. I'm going to describe someone, if you know anything about world religions, I'll just describe this person, you tell me who it is. And he proceeded to give them this list: born of a virgin, tended by shepherds, teaching master, had 12 companions, promised immortality, performed miracles, was buried in a tomb. At 3 days, he rose again. They celebrate this in Easter. They called him the Good Shepherd, the Messiah. His followers celebrated Sunday as the sacred day. His followers celebrated a Eucharist called the Lord's Supper. Who am I talking about? Everyone in the room knew better. They already knew where this was going, except for this one girl. And her hand immediately went up. And it didn't even dawn on me that I wasn't yet worried about this. But then she says, it's Jesus. And I realized, she missed that training. He said, no, that's not Jesus. That is Mithras, Persian deity, about 400 years before Jesus. As a matter of fact, it's true that if you go to Rome and you go to the most ancient basilicas in Rome and you walk down, you will find that those basilicas are built on top of older Christian churches. And if you walk down one more level, you'll find that there is a Mithraic temple at the bottom. Basilicas in Rome are largely built on the sites of the Mithras worshipers. She came to us afterwards. And even though I explained that this is, by the way, I've done a lot of research on all prior mythologies to train young people. None of this is actually true of Mithras, okay? None of it is. But you don't know if some authority is telling you this in class. Even having told her this, she says, at the end of the day, she says, I'm not sure what to do. I'm not even sure. That shook me so bad, I'm not even sure I can pray tonight. I'm not sure there's a God to pray to anymore. I said, really? This knucklehead comes in 45 minutes and he shook you that hard? But he did. That's when it's time to nurture. That's when it's time to pick up your mentoring. It's not, apologetics is often seen as me just spouting off facts to you. It's not about that. It's about me developing deep relationships with young people with whom I can share truth. It has never been about a fact collection. It's always relationship and truth claims attached at the hip. Truth claims without a relationship is just noise. Relationship without truth claims is just pandering. Young people come to the person who they have the deepest relationship and they ask that question first. It's probably mom and dad. But they have lots of relationship and no information. So if I can't get the information, I will go someplace else where I have no relationship and get the information over there. All I'm asking parents to do is to be the person with the deepest relationship. As leaders, we have to have those relationships, but know what the answer is. So it's about mentoring. So my question for you is, how many of your students and your leaders could you truly say that you are mentoring? Not that they work under you or they serve with you, but that you are truly mentoring. And then flip that question. Who's mentoring you? This is important. This is the test, train, paradigm is simply test, require, arm, involve, and nurture. And a lot of this is because we are called in Scripture all over the place to train. What do we mean by that word? It's about calendar. But I was say it's about doing something. You know this expression, talk is cheap? I love that expression, right? You know where that comes from, right? That's a biblical expression. That is found in Ecclesiastes. King Solomon said it. Talk is cheap, like daydreams and other useless activities. Fear God instead. Do something. So my only call to all of you who are in this room today, you're the leaders. What are you waiting for? Do something now. Because that calendar, do something, ends up being what's going to change everything you do in the pulpit. Everything you do with your students. It's about this aiming at this target. I don't know if a lot of you who are in this are good shooters. You are hunters. You're good shooters. We have to shoot constantly. And we do it the same way every time, right? I pull it out. I have the exact same position every time. I put it back. I can put it back without looking, lock the holster. I never have to look at my holster to lock the holster because I don't want to take my eyes off the threat. So I pull it out, and I put it back in, and I can lock the holster. If I jam, tap, rack, bang, I've just memorized the clear. I know how to clear a jam. It's muscle memory. You do it over and over and over again until it's muscle memory. When you do Q&As at colleges, it becomes muscle memory. I don't think I'm going to hear a new question on a college campus. I've heard all of them. They're always the same questions. Well, I want our students to develop this kind of muscle memory because they're constantly training, answering the questions for themselves. Then when they go to university, they know how to answer these questions because they've been answering for the last 4 years. It's just muscle memory. Does that make sense? The more you repeat an action, the more likely you are to do it under pressure. That's what muscle memory does. So my encouragement to all of you is just to look at your ministries and say, what am I doing yet? Have I activated these folks? And to do something. Now, that being said, we want to get you guys out of here in 15 minutes if you want to go. But let's ask a few questions. I will repeat your question after you ask it so everyone can hear it. And then I'll try to answer it. Go.
In light of what we heard this morning about lost people, them not understanding our language sometimes when coming to church, did you hear that, by the way?
Yes, and I've written on this online as well. The whole Christianese idea of, yeah.
The question is, how do we both reach the lost who don't speak Christianese or understand our Baptist culture, but at the same time don't dumb down our faith, but train, as you said, our current members and require more in depth?
How many of you became okay, did y'all hear that? How do we basically not dumb down? We don't want to dumb down what we're saying, but at the same time, we don't want to get caught up in the language and not understand the language of the people we're talking to. Well, how many of you became Christians as adults? Raise your hand. How many as later adults, say after 30? A lot of times what I have to do is remind myself of what I used to think like. It wasn't that long ago that I was that guy. And so language, I was always unfamiliar with church language. And it always did bother me, even today, when we use words like ministry. This is my ministry. I mean, for a non-Christian, that's like, really? You go to ministry. Awesome. It's not appealing to me as a non-Christian, but I get it. I use that word all the time. I understand. It's hard sometimes to communicate certain ideas. I would ask yourself to think of it this way. Every time I talk to any group, I consider them to be a jury. And I have to instruct juries from the bottom up. Not only what is the evidence for this, but what are the rules of evidence I'm going to ask you to use to evaluate this evidence. I pretend like you're basically all junior hires in this room. So just imagine remember people would say, hey, one way to overcome your fear of public speaking is to imagine everyone's naked when you talk. One way to overcome your high-level talking is to imagine everyone's a junior hire. And if you do that, I'll tell you, I'll be honest with you guys, I'm writing my 8th book right now, and I'll tell you, I've learned to write at an 8th grade level for a reason. If you don't write it at an 8th grade level, people don't read it. And you might think, well, I would read it. Yeah, I would read it too, but we're in the 1% who buy books. The other 99% you're trying to influence do not want the book at more than an 8th grade level. And I'm trying to influence that group. We already get it, folks. We already are interested in apologetics and theology. We're in the 1%. If you want the 99% to get it, we're going to have to start thinking like people who don't understand this and pitch it so you can catch it. I'm always trying to throw the ball across the center of the plate at 40 miles an hour so that my people can swing hard, make contact, send it over the fence. I got no curveballs. Right? So we're trying to throw the ball in a way that people can catch it. And that's a lot of what we're doing here, folks. I'm an apologist, which means first and foremost, I'm a translator. There are expert witnesses in this field. William Lane Craig is an expert witness. Have you ever listened to the Reasonable Faith podcast? It's not easy to listen to. It's a high-level podcast. Alvin Plantinga at Notre Dame, a great source of information. Could never let Alvin teach junior hires. I'm a translator. I'm taking what Alvin taught me and I'm translating it for junior hires, which really is the church in general. Does that make sense? So I would say, yeah, that's part of it, is we just see yourself as a translator first. And everything I do is just trying to translate. I don't have a PhD in anything. And I've got time to go get one. I would never get one. I'm a translator. Basically, we're popularizers. Go. Okay, so the 4 questions you ask for reliability of a witness are, number 1, were they really there to see what they said they saw? Were they present? 2, can they be verified or corroborated in some way? And that could be a lot of different things. If you're in a place where there's a bank robbery, and the witness says, yeah, he leaned up with a gun, he said, give me all your money. And I want to corroborate that statement. Well, I could go back to the counter and I could find that there's a palm print right there where this guy said he did that. I can verify his statement with just a palm print. But that will not tell me what this guy said. It also won't tell me what I was wearing. It also won't tell me if this guy had a gun. So it turns out all corroborative evidence is touch point evidence. It gives you a small fraction of the claim. And we still consider that small fraction enough to corroborate it. So when I'm looking for corroborative evidence of the Bible, I know I'm not going to have a video camera in place. I'm going to be looking for small archaeological, cultural, textual pieces of evidence that can help me make the case. Third thing, have they been honest and accurate without changing their story over time? Fourth thing, do they possess a bias that would cause them to lie to me? Now, I'll tell you, as we didn't talk about it in that session, what those biases are. There are only 3 reasons why anyone commits a murder. Only 3. So I don't walk into a murder scene and go, oh my gosh, there's 1,000 reasons why somebody could have killed this girl. No, there are only 3 reasons why somebody would kill this girl. Only 3. They're the same 3 things that cause you guys to do stupid things as pastors. Cause me to stumble. The same 3 things are behind any sin you've ever committed. These are the same 3 motives for thefts. Same 3 motives for any misbehavior. There's only 3 motives. Are you ready? Here they are. Financial greed. A lot of stupid done over money. Sexual lust. The third one is more nuanced, and it covers a lot of other things. The pursuit of power. That's it. Oh, what about jealousy? Well, why are you jealous? It's one of those 3 things. What about revenge? Well, why are you feeling vengeance? It's one of those 3 things. Get to the root of it. It's only those. What about just flat crazy? Well, if you're criminally insane, and very few people are, I'm not going to prosecute you. If I've got a prosecutable motive, it's going to be in one of those 3 areas. Make sense? If you wanted to protect yourself as a pastor, easy. Only those 3 areas you got to protect. Money, sex, and power. Take those 3 out, you're good. If you find yourself doing anything because you're thinking about one of those 3 things, knock it off. And most of it's going to be power. Like, so for example, when someone says, hey, no one disrespects me in my neighborhood, pop. What is that? Pursuit of power. Pride. Jealousy is usually a power issue. Someone comes into a Walmart and shoots 30 people of some other color that's not the color they are. What is that? That's power. That's pursuit of power. That's, I think I'm better than you. That's power. That's behind a lot of misbehavior. Now, the question is, if the disciples are lying, what are they getting out of this? Are they getting money out of this? I don't think so. They getting girlfriends out of this? I don't think so. Bart says what they're getting is power. They are becoming religious leaders in a small community, which they had nothing, were nothing before. Now all of a sudden they're religious leaders. So like Paul, who writes most of the New Testament is written by Paul. So you're telling me that Paul one day wakes up and says, I'm in this position right now as a religious person of power within Judaism, trained by one of the best rabbis on the planet, considered to be a very devout, right, Paul? I'm going to jump out of that position of authority, power, and respect and jump in with these guys and get my butt kicked all over the planet for the next 30 years, hoping to someday return to the position I started with a larger group? That's possible, but it's not reasonable. So I think that's why I look at bias when I'm trying to decide if a witness is telling me something that's true. Good?
Well, so the second part of that is how do you argue the validity of scripture such as Jesus' temptation by Satan?
Mm-hmm.
There were no, when the writers or reporters of it in the three gospels are not present, you can't verify it, and he might have been biased, just like Muhammad going into the
Okay, good. Excellent question. So what do you, I have people ask me this all the time. A lot of what's in Scripture is reported by, and it's clearly there were no eyewitnesses to it. But when we're talking to eyewitnesses for a cold case, I'm allowed to ask certain questions. It may just be, what did he tell you about that event? So clearly Jesus told somebody about the event, and now you become the person I can test. Make sense? So I think all of those events that don't, there's much more. And by the way, we have a standard called hearsay in criminal trials, in which we say, okay, so he said that to you. Well, I can't use you in trial. I need to get back to him. I can't cross-examine you because you are the source of this information. He's the source of the information. I need to be able to cross-examine the source of the information, not you. One person removed is called hearsay. But that's a standard we use in criminal trials because we have an unusually high standard to protect even the guilty from being falsely prosecuted, right? Because you can be guilty and still be falsely prosecuted for something else. We would rather let 100 guilty people go than falsely prosecute one innocent person. So we have a standard that says no hearsay, but you could never use that to judge history because that standard is too high. That means I could never trust anything about your own personal family history beyond the living eyewitnesses. So your great-grandfather did what? Sorry, don't believe that. That's hearsay from your grandfather. No, that's not how you do history. That's how you do criminal trials. So when it comes to the history of Jesus, of course, in history, we're allowed to go to a secondary source. That's reasonable, if that makes sense. Ask another question. Got a little bit more time. Don't be afraid. Go. Okay, so what I've discovered is when I started doing this, when you get a jury, we'll do a voir dire process, and we kind of know who every juror is, and we select out the people we want, but we're not really looking at it in terms of how smart are they. It's not an IQ test. I don't need the most brilliant thinkers. To be honest, the higher your IQ, the more usually your pride will get in the way to listening to expert witnesses. So I'm looking for people who are smart, but I don't need like genius. So when I get this thing paneled and I've got 12 in the box and 4 alternates, I don't really know what their academic, I know what their academic level is, but I don't know how smart they are. So I'm trying to throw the ball in a way that I know that everyone can catch. Now, the question is, so when I did that presentation about Bible reliability, that's the exact same presentation I do for junior hires. Word for word, nothing is different. And what I've discovered with junior hires is, yeah, they're in. They get it. You all got it too. I think largely because I want to show you, look, I could have told you before we started, I'm going to make a case for the reliability of the scripture, and I'm going to use the ante-Nicene church fathers. And all of you would have said, really, can I skip that presentation? That sounds dreadfully boring. But if I can show it to you as a criminal chain of custody, well, now you're willing to listen to these ancient dead guys who nobody cares about anymore, like Irenaeus, because they're officers in the chain of custody. I'm always trying to figure out a way to throw the ball so everyone can catch it. Does that make sense? And that's what I mean when I say that I want to have a level. So if it was to me, I would say if you got junior hires and high schoolers, get them in the big church service and teach them apologetics with the adults. Because I think they can all handle it. We do a thing called Fearless Faith Conferences, Friday night and a Saturday, and we invite everybody to those, and it's a combination from junior high up to their parents. I don't want to the adults, but I don't want to lose the kids. When we're done, if you go to the book table, I see 2 people will come back. One lady came back after a Fearless Faith, and she said, I want you to know that my husband was here today, and just so you know, he didn't fall asleep at all during the service. I thought, really? Like, that's an accomplishment, I guess, for her. In the next few minutes, someone walked up and said, I want you to know that my kids were with me today, and for the first time in a long time, they didn't look at their phones. That's what we're trying to do. Right? Not that it's not about me doing this. I'm just saying that it's a visual. So I would encourage you to think about why we have these big screens up here. Right? We have these big screens because we can capitalize on a language that I call visualish. It's not English, it's visualish. So I'm writing another book. Well, how do I write a book? I get out my Photoshop and I get out my PowerPoint and I build presentations until I think they're visually persuasive, and then those are my notes to write the book. Because I know if I can persuade a jury, and I'll tell you, I will sometimes spend 4 days on a visual sequence to get to the end of it and go, this sucks, it's not good. It's like boring to me. I'm like, start over again. And I'll sometimes do a lot of weird stuff, like I'm making an analogy between the life of Elvis and the manuscript evidence for the New Testament in this next book. So I'm studying every book ever written about Elvis. so I can show the analogy. Who does that? What? That's so stupid, right? At the end of it, I do it all. I'm like, I don't like it. And my wife's like, you just wasted 2 weeks on this Elvis thing. I know. It sounded good at first. But it sucked. So I just didn't do it. So a lot of this is us stumbling through this visually. And I would encourage you right now, if you are not yet doing visual presentations for young people, to move toward visual presentations. There's a reason why these folks are described almost universally, Gen Z, as digital natives. You and I, we might be digital immigrants, but these folks were born with this thing to begin with. And what changes the digital landscape is not the technology or the information, it's the visual aspect of the phone. These phones will not be getting smaller, folks. Because everyone I know who's in that generation are watching their Netflix and Hulu Plus and whatever they're watching it on, not on laptops, not on desktops. They're watching them. Right now, 60% of my website traffic is from mobile platforms. 60% right now. 5 years ago, it was not that way. It was maybe 20% mobile platforms. But now I realize whatever I do, it's got to look on, this is where it's going to be shown. Any video I make is going to be shown on this platform. Most of you already know you're only using your phones to watch digital media. Unless you're at home and it's your family and you're watching on the big screen, it's being watched here. We are raising up a visual generation. Well, one reason why you upgrade your phone. Why do you upgrade your phone? Because the operating system is so much better. No, it's not. You can't even tell the operating system's any different. You upgrade your phone because higher resolution, better camera. It's entirely visual. Your MP3s don't sound any better on the new phone. But the photographs are sure a lot better. It's a visual generation we are raising, and so I would encourage you to start speaking visually if you can do it.